So, Vice President Dr. Bawumia recently announced that Ghana will launch its first local music and movie streaming platform in November, that's next month, aiming to provide better financial rewards for Ghanaian creators. While the announcement is exciting, it has raised several questions regarding its feasibility, potential bottlenecks, and whether it can avoid becoming yet another unfulfilled government promise. While culture journalist Kenneth Awoche will be joining me with some analysis here, but we want to first listen to Dr. Bawumia, what he had to say when he met stakeholders this week.
For music. So all the streaming platforms like Spotify and so on are all externally owned. And so when we put our music on those platforms, it's not surprising that the returns in terms of the payments that are made to our musicians are very little. Very little. And they are not much to write home about in general. And so the issue for us of making sure we have a streaming platform locally for music and put in all the catalogs from A to Z that we can find in Ghana on the platforms. That has been something that it has needed to be done for a long time.
So that was the Vice President there. Culture journalist Kenneth Awoche has been gauging reactions to this. He's in studio with me to discuss. So what are people saying about the feasibility of this plan announced by the Vice President there?
So since this announcement was made some days ago, there has been varying reactions across stakeholders and experts in the creative space. As to its feasibility, it is something that people have said that it's very possible to, organize or create a platform such as this for music.
Like a good idea.
Yes, like a good idea, basically, because there's already been talk and there's been frustrations among creative, producers in Ghana considering how much they are able to retain from these platforms that already exist. And for instance, Apple Music, YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, all of these platforms are churning out one more mode of, product or the other on behalf of these artists. And what the frustrations have been has been about mostly, the revenue that is generating from these platforms. And so that is one thing for which reason people feel like it's a good step that has been taken. But another thing that has been, dominating discussions is whether or not this platform that the Vice President is talking about will be able to compete effectively on the market, considering the challenges that are already built and confronting the creative space in terms of migrating their content onto digital spaces and dominating the market as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, and we have to begin from somewhere. So, I mean, what are the bottlenecks that people are talking about that need addressing?
So I was having a conversation with an executive of one of the major streaming giants across the world who are in Ghana right now. And one of the issues that they came up with was about an existing framework, for which reason there are some challenges when it comes to promoting the content of Ghanaian origin onto projecting them onto the world at large, or in Africa at large. Because if you look at, you compare Ghana's creative space to that of Nigeria and South Africa. South Africa is known to have a lot of hold when it comes to like the framework through which some of these contents can be churned out and made into revenue and sent back to the creators of this product. When it goes to Nigeria, there is the numbers. That's the argument that's usually being made, that Nigeria has the numbers to push these content when it comes out. And so generating revenue from that for the artist or for the movie producer is also quite possible. But Ghana is lacking in terms of infrastructure and when it comes to the numbers as well. So people are looking at how the Vice President is going to look at, surmount some of these challenges. There's also the issue of data, for these, creative work. There's also the lack of partnership between, for instance, private sector, because some people are saying that if this is a good initiative, but it would be better led by the private sector because they have the wherewithal to be able to do some of these things because they have, institutional memory and, lessons from other areas where similar platforms have been created.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned South Africa. I remember I read an article this week that said more people there are turning to streaming services for entertainment, not a paid satellite TV. And so, as the government thinks about this, what can they do to ensure this doesn't become an unfulfilled promise?
First of all, a heavy involvement of the private sector will be something that will yield a lot of benefits for this particular mission, because As we know, governments come and governments go, depending on how the elections turn out, what is going to happen to this promise, because we've seen other, political statements being made, and then when, the party is giving the political power, we see that usually the implementation of that promise becomes a problem. But if you are looking at an issue such as creating a digital platform for creative works, you need a very sustainable way of keeping it running. And so the changes in government, if it becomes the case, will also very much affect these things. So the issue of continuity is one big thing that the private sector or the stakeholders are talking about, and the fact that private sector and partnerships to be with in terms of such as like telcos and all of those stakeholders, because data or internet is a very instrumental part when it comes to seeing the realization of some of these products. And so these are basically some of the issues that the industry stakeholders are talking about.
You make an important point about continuity. I mean, we have just a few days to election, 50 days, and you're wondering if the MPP government doesn't win, what becomes of this initiative.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Kenneth Auchidako, country journalist. myjoyonline.com, yes. And more news on our website, myjoyonline.com.